We begin tonight with the second US presidential debate, which saw Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump trading insults, acrimony and claims of misogyny. It began without a handshake, a small absence perhaps, but indicative of how much tension and enmity there is between these two. A CNN poll released just minutes ago, which is scientific and considered the most reliable of post-debate polls, said Trump's performance had improved on the first debate, but it was Clinton who'd still won it. The poll margin 57% saying Clinton won, as opposed to 34% for Trump. The Republican and Democratic nominees were facing off in a town hall-style contest in St. Louis, with WikiLeaks, sex scandals and taxes all being addressed during the 90 minutes of questioning. We go live shortly to our correspondent Simon Marks, who was there. But first, Lorna Shattuck reviews the heat and looks for light.
One of the most acrimonious debates in modern presidential history began without the traditional handshake. And it was the issue on everyone's minds that came up almost immediately.
We received a lot of questions online, Mr. Trump, about the tape that was released on Friday. As you can imagine, you bragged that you have sexually assaulted women. Do you understand that?
No, I didn't say that at all. I don't think you understood what was said. This was locker room talk. I'm not proud of it. I apologize to my family. I apologize to the American people.
Shortly before the debate began, Mr. Trump hosted a surprise panel with women who accused Bill Clinton of sexual assault. And after repeating his earlier apology for the videotape, he then launched an attack on Mrs. Clinton's husband's infidelities.
If you look at Bill Clinton, far worse, minor words, and his was action. His was what he's done to women. There's never been anybody in the history of politics in this nation that's been so abusive to women. Hillary Clinton attacked those same women.
But she hit back, saying Mr. Trump's remarks showed he wasn't fit to be president.
If this were just about one video, maybe what he's saying tonight would be understandable. But everyone can draw their own conclusions at this point about whether or not the man in the video or the man on the stage respects women. But he never apologizes for anything to anyone.
But Mrs. Clinton was also pressed on an issue her campaign hasn't really been able to counter well: the WikiLeaks release of speeches she gave to Wall Street bankers when she implied she might have different public and private positions on issues.
It is hard sometimes to get the Congress to do what you want to do, and you have to keep working at it. And yes, President Lincoln was trying to convince some people. He used some arguments. Convincing other people, he used other arguments. That was a great, I thought, a great display of presidential leadership.
Donald Trump was perhaps more upfront when asked if he'd used a loss of nearly $1 billion to avoid paying taxes.
Of course I do. And so do all of her donors, or most of her donors. I know many of her donors.
Overall, the Republican candidate seemed more prepared and Mrs. Clinton visibly more tense than their first encounter. But the tone of the debate is perhaps what viewers and listeners will remember most. Two candidates who seemed to disagree about everything and weren't shy about expressing it.
We have a divided nation because people like her, and believe me, she has tremendous hate in her heart.
It is sort of amusing to hear somebody who hasn't paid federal income taxes in maybe 20 years talking about what he's going to do.
That changed just briefly at the end, though, when each was asked to name one thing they admired about the other.
His children are incredibly able and devoted, and I think that says a lot about Donald.
I will say this about Hillary. She doesn't quit. She doesn't give up. I respect that.
A brief moment of reaching across the aisle before the spin and the pummeling begin once again ahead of the third debate in Las Vegas on the 19th of October. For Checkpoint, this is Lorna Shattuck.